Hello, everyone, and thanks for stopping in to get a review of the material that we like to cover in our self-defense seminars. So I'm going to go into a slideshow presentation and kind of take you through that material one step at a time. So bear with me for just a moment as I switch over to that screen. Okay, this is information about our self-defense clinics that we teach. We've taught these clinics for many organizations in the area, including the Andersons, Toledo Board of Realtors, Owens Corning, other groups and organizations, and we've been doing them for a number of years. And the title of our clinics are Proven Skills That Will Make You 90% Less Likely to Be a Victim. And that's what the theme that you're going to see throughout our one-hour clinic is that most self-defense situations can be prevented, and we want to focus on that. We also are going to give some fun and practical advice and hands-on for that 10% of the time when the situation can't be prevented. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I started martial arts when I was just 14 years old, and one of the main reasons I got started was because I was really the victim of what, by today's standards, would be considered violence. I was just relentlessly picked on. We had traveled from many areas as a child, and I ended up in some really, really rough neighborhoods, and this was a real issue for me. So one of the things that was really interesting was I decided as I started my martial arts practice I was going to get good enough, and I'm sometimes a little embarrassed to say that I got to a point where I decided, you know, I'm going to get to the point where I can fight, and when somebody comes up and attacks me after that, I'm just going to really, really, really clean the wall with them. Well, what happened was it took me about a year to 2 years to get competent enough that I really began to know that I could defend myself. And the thing I like to tell my students is that amazingly, when I got to the point where I could defend myself, I never had to. Because by the time I got physically strong and mentally strong enough, the people that ordinarily would want to give me a problem, I just didn't look like the kind of person that could be pushed around anymore. And that's one of our big major goals, is to teach people how to do that, maybe even do a shortcut to that, by using their physiology and the way that they look and the way that they move and speak, even without maybe those martial arts skills. We can give them some of those martial arts skills as well. But what we really want to do is we want to get you to the point where you don't need to fight because you present yourself in a way that says that you're not the kind of person that can be pushed around. So what we do at our dojo really quickly is I like to tell people we are an adventure-based self-development program. And what I mean by that is a lot of people study martial arts for a lot of really external goals. They want better fitness, and yeah, man, we can really do that for you. And they want to really learn to fight, and we can definitely teach you how to do that as well. But the most important part of what we do is changing people from the inside out. And let me explain how this works. If you imagine the scariest thing in the world that might happen to a person, it would be maybe being attacked, physically attacked by another human being who wants to harm you. And then imagine putting yourself in an environment where you're able to rehearse those kinds of scenarios and train your body to the point where you absolutely have destroyed all fear. When you do that, now ask yourself this important question. How would the person that you would have to become to be fearless live everyday life? And if you're like most of us, what you'll discover is when you become that person that is fearless, you immediately become a better parent, you become a better boss or employee, you become a better human being, and you achieve more of the things in your life that you want. Really quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about our school and our dojo. We opened in 1988. We opened in South Toledo. We've had a commercial location. We've taught in that location full-time as our one and only profession, 6 days a week since that time, every single week. What makes us unique is that while much of the technique in the martial arts world today is similar, we are unique in that we also teach the deeper, more life-expanding elements of the art. In other words, we use the physical part of the martial arts as what is known in the yoga world as a tantra. And a tantra is concrete, physical action, a physical exercise that is designed to create higher states of consciousness, or in other words, mental discipline and self-control. What we will have covered today are these three areas plus a question and answer at the end. First, we're going to do a brief warm-up, get everybody moving, get your body ready for some action. Second, then we're going to go into prevention, and prevention is a big part of what we do. I'm going to teach you the specific skills and how to remember those skills to prevent conflict. And third, application. Now that's the part that you won't really see in this video, but this is what's really covered, and that's the part that everybody usually likes the most and they get to talk about because they actually get some hands-on training in self-defense. But we will cover at least the principles in this video of those activities. So the first thing under the category of prevention that I'd like to talk about is what we call the PALE method. And PALE is an acronym that we actually invented in our dojo to really expand upon the idea that if you follow these 4 principles, you can avoid of all conflict. Now, the principle that we teach under is, first of all, to start out with, is that people that may want to harm us are what we call transmitters. And a transmitter is a person that's looking for a victim. Or in other words, as in using the radio as an analogy, a transmitter is looking for an antenna. And so our goal with our program is to change you and make you not an antenna, so those would-be attackers, those would-be transmitters, will completely overlook you, and you know, maybe they would attack someone else. God forbid they attack anyone. But the point is they'll be leaving you alone. So let's go through really quickly what the acronym PALE, as in like a bucket pail, stands for. P, the P is for purpose, and that means to move with purpose. We're going to talk about that in the next few moments. A, it stands for avoid, and that means to avoid conflicts when possible. I, intuition, that means to learn to listen to your unconscious mind. All of us have one. It's very powerful. We're going to learn to listen to that more efficiently, and sometimes that can keep us out of trouble. And L stands for large, and it's a way to move physically that makes your body look big. Now, I know a lot of you that maybe have not been able to live up to your New Year's resolutions might hear that and think, wait, you don't want to look large. Well, we're not talking about girth here. What we're really talking about is a way of holding your body in positions that sort of expand, that say, I'm comfortable being here, I take up space, and I don't look like I'm the target. And then there's a very important quote that we use. It's from an anonymous sword master. We use this all the time when I teach all of our classes, even with our children. And the sword master says that the cleanest cut, you know, in the Iaido, having that clean cut, being able to cut through that shoot of bamboo perfectly is considered the essence, the beauty of the art. It says the cleanest cut is made with the sword that is never drawn. And our goal is to make it so that you never have to draw your sword. And that's the best martial art and the best self-defense that there is. So let's start with each of the letters. The letter P stands for purpose. And when we talk about purpose, what we mean about is we want to move with a purpose. So you know what this looks like if you've ever been to a major city, particularly like downtown Chicago or downtown New York, particularly in the financial district. When you have people who have set really strong goals and have a lot to do, they move in a certain way. The tourists are always easy to identify, not just because of the cameras around their neck, but because of the way they move in the street. And we don't want to move in the street as if we look like we're a visitor or we're a tourist. We want to look more like one of those business people. And that means that we essentially move from point A to B as if we have an appointment, and it's not just an appointment, but we're the one that's sort of in charge of the appointment. We have a speaking engagement, and we need to be there 15 minutes early, and that is where we are headed. Our heads are up, our eyes are up, our shoulders are back, our chest is out. We're looking around, and we're aware of our environment, and that's very, 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 very important. And we can practice that in a variety of ways as well. The second letter or acronym of PALE is the word A, the letter A, and that stands for avoid. And there's some really simple things, and I know you hear them all the time, but they're really, really important. And the first thing is whenever possible, travel in at least a pair, 2 people to the car, much safer than one. Second thing is when we interact with people, a lot of times attackers or would-be attackers are doing what we call testing the water. So they may come up to us and speak to us, and they may ask us for something. They may ask you for some change, and they may ask you for the time. And what they're really doing is they're really trying to determine whether you're a weak person or a strong person. And so obviously we want to speak with confidence, we want to have the eye contact and all those things that we'll be talking about. But it also means that when we're in a situation where maybe we feel a little bit threatened, or maybe the person that's coming up to us is a little bit mentally imbalanced, it's really important that we don't show emotion, not even friendly emotion in those kinds of instances, because that can sometimes get us in trouble. The third thing is when we speak with confidence, but also to speak with a nurturing tone, and that's really important when we speak. When we speak to other people, we want to speak in a way that shows that we are respectful of them. We don't want a person that's slightly imbalanced in any way to take any of the words that we use and think that in any way we are trying to belittle them or make them feel less. Sometimes that can take a person that's imbalanced and sort of push them over the edge. And then finally, I want to talk to you about block chairs. Now, this is a really quick story. This came from a person that I had known many, many years ago. And he was studying an ancient kind of karate where they did a lot of these really hard, powerful blocks, like over your head, like with the fists closed, and looks like something you'd see almost like a robot, a rock and sock robot. Many people that study martial arts know that in the modern world, those are not really very useful for self-defense or much of anything. And I said to him, I said, you know, sir, we do all this fighting, we learn all these techniques for skills, yet I see a lot of times you practicing those really hard blocks with your arms. And I said to him, hey, well, what's the purpose? And he said, you know, it's the chair. I said, what, the chair? I don't understand. What do you mean the chair? He said, you know, when you're in a bar, that guy's really mad at you, and he tries to hit you over the head with a chair. And my point of telling that story is that is not the kind of person that should probably be studying martial arts. That is not the kind of person that should be learning martial arts, and it's certainly not the kind of person that should be teaching martial arts. When you study self-defense and real self-defense development and real martial arts development, one of the things that you should begin to realize is that you want to begin to think in terms of living a more peaceful life. And if you have one of those block chairs people that's around you, it's just a matter of time before you get into a conflict, maybe something that he or she started. So avoid that at all costs. All right, the next letter in our acronym of the PALE acronym is I for intuition. And you know, the image that we use for this is the image of Spider-Man using his spider sense. See, I believe that all of us have a spider sense, right? I'm a big fan of self-development works and self-development books. And if you go over to Barnes & Noble or go to your local library and you begin to check out some of the different books that are available, one of the things that you're going to notice is that almost all of the success people will give you the recipe for their success. And yet, if it was that easy, we would just get the book, do what the guy in the book says, and then we would be successful too. But if you look throughout that book, it might be a 400-page book, At some point, that person that wrote the book will tell you what the real secret is. I mean, they'll give you the practical application stuff, which is important, and you have to follow that. But most of the people are doing the same thing. But some people are getting really amazing results when other people aren't getting nearly those results. And what we discovered is that at its core, the Warren Buffetts of the world, the Bill Gates of the world, the super successful class will always say something. They always say they followed all these systems, but in the end, they followed their instinct. In other words, they listened to that little voice, that still small voice. And what will happen to us from a self-defense standpoint is you'll go different places and you'll get a tingling sense. You'll say, I shouldn't be here. This doesn't feel right to me. Now, that spider sense is not real specific. You know, it could be, that you're getting ready to eat something that's going to upset your stomach, or it could be that you're in an environment that you don't need to be in because you're feeling some ill will. And every single person, without exception, when we interview them after an assault, they'll have a tendency to tell us that they knew in advance they shouldn't have been there, they felt something was wrong, and they just didn't listen to themselves. Now, there's a couple things that you can do to stimulate your intuition. And one of the single biggest things that you could do to stimulate your own intuition is to simply ask yourself 8, 9, or 10 times a day, how does this feel? So if you're driving to work and you could turn to the left or turn to the right, and it's all about the same within a 1 or 2 minute difference, ask yourself, does going to the left feel right or does going to the right feel right? And many times when you start doing this, you'll start developing the sensitivity. And one of the things that you're going to notice is you're going to notice that when your little voice in your head says go to the right, you're going to begin to avoid traffic jams. You're going to be able to avoid other situations that you would have gotten yourself into in the past. So begin to listen to your intuition. That's going to be really important to you. All right. And then last, the L in our acronym, in the word pale, stands for large. And that means to hold yourself in postures that make yourself look as big as possible, right? So a few weeks ago, I was out in California, Santa Barbara, and I got to do a little bit of mountain hiking. And one of the things that's kind of neat out there is you'll see these signs that the park rangers put up about the mountain lions and how to keep yourself safe. And there's a lot of good little points, and some of these things apply readily to self-defense. But one of the major things is when you're confronted by the animal, never make yourself look small. Always hold yourself in an upright position, looking up. And that means in everyday life, we want to hold our bodies in a way so that our chests are back, our shoulders are back, and there's certain things that we really, really, really want to avoid. If you're a female, you really want to avoid fumbling in that purse for those keys, and anything that you do, we want to avoid fumbling, looking down, trying to pick things up off of the ground. Again, these things kind of bring us down to the ground, and they make us look like victims. They don't make us look like the powerful people that we're capable of being. The other thing is, it's huge, and we're all a little guilty of this in this day and age, but smartphones can be your biggest enemy. Not only is a smartphone a target that's envied by people that might want to steal, but by looking into your smartphone, it takes you to be standing 6 feet tall, and your frame collapses around, and your vision collapses around that little screen, and you look to a person that might be having ill will in their heart. You look like an appropriate target. So be aware of making your body posture look rather large. So now we go over a couple of really important points that we love to cover in our seminars. The first point is that a robbery is not the same thing as an assault. And this is really important. I know you've heard it before, but there is no amount of money anywhere, anyhow, that is worth your life. So there are people that are interested in stealing your money or stealing your cell phone or your wallet or your identification or your purse. And our answer to that is let them have it, especially in this day and age. All of that stuff can be replaced very, 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 very quickly. So don't escalate a robbery situation into and assault situation. They're two different things. If you feel physically threatened, you feel physically attacked in some way, that's one matter. But if someone wants your property, simply give them your property and call the authorities. In many cases, if you comply very quickly but with confidence, it will not turn into an assault, and that's what we all hope for. Now, there's a caveat to that, and the caveat to that is if the perpetrator wants you to move to a different crime scene. So, in other words, you may think the person wants your wallet, but they want you to go into the alley, or they want you to go into their car. And, of course, we don't want to violate the intuition, the spider sense that we already talked about, but the reality is that statistics show that the reason that a perpetrator might want a victim to move from point A to point B is because at the secondary crime scene is where they want to commit the assault, whether that be sexual or otherwise. So statistics show that if you refuse to go to that secondary crime scene, your chances of surviving go way, way up. In fact, the chances of not even turning into assault go way, way up. But once you go to that secondary scene where the perpetrator is in fact comfortable, you've put yourself in a dangerous situation. So say, stop, I'm not going there. Take my wallet, but I'm not going there. So now we'll move into the second phase of some of the things that we like to cover in our clinics, and that is what happens if I am attacked. And the PAIL system that we just talked about, that P, A, I, and L, all represented things that were designed to prevent attack by 90%. But there is that 10% of the case where maybe you've been practicing the PAIL system, but be that as it may, you still are in a situation where you have to defend yourself. And we're going to address that right now and kind of move into that. So the first thing is at my house, we have a rule that is when somebody's eating a snack or something and they drop it on the floor, we call that the 3-second rule. And the 3-second rule is if you pick up the potato chip really quickly, then you can eat it, and then you don't have to feel bad about eating it. A lot of people have heard that before. Well, in self-defense, we have what we call a 30-second rule. And the way that the 30-second rule works is this. If I look around and I've got a big crowd, and as long as it's just average people, or even people that are even athletes, but I'm not talking about trained ring fighters or anything like that, but even athletes, even people that are in good shape, if I were to bring a heavy bag into the room, hang it up, and say, you know, who would like to demonstrate some moves on this bag, and guys, big guys might raise their hands, I'll say, okay, beat up the bag for as long as you can, go with everything you've got. And what you'll notice is that people rarely make it all the way to 30 seconds before getting completely gassed. So in a real self-defense situation, you can't win. It's not like a tournament where you can get a trophy. You only can survive. And to make that survival really easy to understand, what we say is your goal is to survive for 30 seconds. Because if you can survive for 30 seconds, there's a very good chance that that's it. You're not going to need much more than that to be able to get away, because the attacker will be gassed. So the first skill that we're going to go over is the idea of what happens during the attack. And so the first thing that we always want you to do is, and it kind of goes under this idea of making yourself look large, but even when you're conflicted with someone physically to look large, what we want to do is we want to really raise our voice. We want our voice to be very strong, very direct. And what we're going to say is we're going to look the person in the eye and we're going to say, back off, really loud. And so we're going to do, during our clinics, we'll do some rehearsing of this, but we want to yell, back off, and look the person in the eye, hands up. And the second thing that we want to do is we want to begin to move the body. So that the body, once the body begins to move, it's much, much harder for a person to feel comfortable attacking something that's moving. They want that small, still, quiet victim, and we don't want to be that. And then the second thing is that when we're physically attacked, that is, somebody has grabbed us, or maybe somebody's attempting to strike us, one of the basic philosophies that kind of falls into the Chinese philosophy of the yin and the yang is that we want to do the opposite of what the attacker wants. So in other words, if somebody grabs us, maybe they grab us by the shirt or something like that, the reason they grab us is because they feel strong holding on to us. So one good strategy is that's when I might want to use my elbows and my knees and some of the strikes that I use. But on the other hand, if the attacker wants to strike me, that might be the time for me to begin to think of some of my locks and some of my grabs to be able to subdue the attacker. So we basically want to do the opposite of whatever the attacker does. And then the last thing to remember is there's really only two kinds of attacks that you ever have to face. And the first are grabs, and that might include chokes, wrist grabs, even people tackled, takedowns, those kinds of things. And then the second kind of attack is a strike. And we want to learn techniques that address both of those areas so that we can be efficient in both of those areas. So let's start by talking about grabs. And in our clinics, we like to review the three main types of grabs that you will have to face. And there's an overriding principle, and that is this: the best grip always wins when we're being grabbed. So there's basically two things that we want to do when somebody grabs us. First, we want to either escape, get away, and that escape might mean getting away and immediately firing a strike of some kind back, or to get a better grip on our attacker. So if I can grab my attacker in a better way than they grip me, they can win. We like to say whoever gets the best handle wins. And there's lots of ways to illustrate that. But one of the ways that I like to illustrate it is if you imagine that the person that attacked you is from another planet or an alien, and on top of their head they have sort of glued to their skull a handle, like an American tourist handle off of a great set of luggage, and they grab us by the throat or they grab us by the lapels and they're shaking us around. There's not a single person at any of our clinics that can't reach up and grab that handle on the top of the head. And if that handle is truly embedded into that alien, into their skull, that person that grabs that handle will be enormously powerful. So when somebody grabs us, the first thought is, I either want to get away, or I want to be able to maybe use that wrist escape against them with a strike of some kind. But we're going to work on some escapes. So the first thing we love to work on are some escapes. We're going to spend a lot of time on wrist escapes. One other little caveat that I want to throw out there is a lot of times bigger guys will say, well, I don't have to worry about a guy coming up and grabbing me by the wrist. That's more of a self-defense for a female. And the reality is all you need to do is to watch the UFC and watch some of the MMA bouts, and what you're going to notice is wrist grabs are a big part of that game. What may happen with guys is it may not start initially as another guy coming up and grabbing you by the wrist. It may start as another kind of a grab or another kind of a push, and inevitably a wrist gets grabbed. So we're going to really spend some time on that and get good at those escapes, the principles involved, and so on. The next type of grab are lapel grabs, and those are grabs when somebody gets a hold of our clothing in some way. And again, the reason why these grabs can be so efficient for the attacker is because that's a better grip. If I grab the guy back kind of around the shoulders or the elbows and he grabs me by the lapels, he's got a much better grip. He can really, really do some damage there. But what I really want to do is I want to learn how to grip him better than he grips me. And if I can do that, then I can be efficient. And then finally, neck chokes. And neck chokes are all the three the most dangerous because not only they require me to be able to get out or to do something, but if I don't do something, I'm going to be hurt. And most attacks where people are really permanently injured or maybe even killed, it comes from that neck choke. And so we want to have some fail-safe methods, which we're going to address and we're going to rehearse and get really, really, really good at. All right. Now, the next section of the physical part of our program is when we're confronted with strikes. And I put in big letters, beware of the sucker punch. The sucker punch is probably the predominant way that people are attacked physically from a striker. And the idea is they're looking for that victim, they're looking for that person that's not paying attention. If you're paying attention, believe it or not, it's really hard for you to get hit. Something that's moving is hard to hit, something that's looking is really, really hard to hit. So oftentimes the attacker will wait until you look away, wait until you look down, and oftentimes the attacker will ask you to look down for some reason, and with the plan of being able to strike you. So even if you're in a situation that's a robbery and you're going to comply, and the person says, well, give me your cell phone. You need to be able to get to that cell phone, and this is a good thing to rehearse, to get to any of your personal effects, and yet at the same time be able to keep those eyes up so you're aware of what's going on. Again, just by being aware, you can avoid that sucker punch. Now, when you see it coming and you don't have time to move out of the way or react, there's a fundamental block that we use. It's the most useful block we've ever seen against the main punch that comes in, which is that big looping hand. And we're going to rehearse that and go over that over and over again in our clinics. And then finally, almost always when the head block is used, the distance is closed, and that means that partner is right on us. And this is a great time to use our elbows, maybe our knees, maybe our head. But we're for sure going to use our elbow because it's probably the most useful of all. We're going to discuss, when we work the strikes that we learn, what are the vital areas, and we're going to learn today some of the strikes that we can do on our own, and I'm going to teach you good body mechanics for that and helping you be able to get through that. But we want to address the main vital areas. In fact, we would even go so far as to say a pretty weak technique, a pretty weak strike that's delivered to the right area can make all the difference in the world. So here are the vital areas that we want to address. The eyes, probably the most important vital area of the body. It takes almost no impact whatsoever to render a partner blind and want to have nothing more to do with you. Second is the nose. The nose itself is kind of secondary to the eyes. Oftentimes when a person's struck in the nose, it may or may not completely finish the person off or any of those kinds of things. But what the nose does is it causes the tear ducts to activate and it causes blindness, and oftentimes the attacker will back down because of that. The chin, because the hinge of the chin is so connected back into the connections between the neck and the brain. Oftentimes when the chin is struck, even with moderate pressure, it causes unconsciousness, it causes dizziness. Throat, obviously, is a very, very powerful strike. And then the knees. And the knees, we say, are an excellent target to strike because they're the support system for keeping the body upright. So when the knee is struck, the person can no longer chase us, and that can be really powerful. You notice that one of the things that makes our clinics kind of unique, and there are people that teach nationally and internationally that teach this differently, but we teach that groin strikes often do not stop an attacker. And I think this is a myth, the idea of striking the groin, and it comes from, of course, many motion pictures that we've seen, and also a lot of personal life experience, because almost all of us, certainly guys, have had the experience of playing softball or baseball, inadvertently getting hit in the groin with a ball, and naturally when we were hit, it hurt so bad and we buckled over and we were in so much pain. And we just immediately assume that because that's what happened to us on a softball field, that's what would really happen to an attacker in real life. And what we've discovered is nothing could be further from the truth. Some of this comes from my 1970s karate background. In the 1970s, and it sounds brutal by today's standards, but in the 1970s and in through the mid-1980s, the groin was a legal fighting target. People that actually got in a ring with each other could kick each other in the groin and win because it wasn't cheating. It was considered part of the sport. And what we discovered was that while it's true, the groin is incredibly sensitive if you're playing softball or if you're just going through every day. The problem with the groin is that in a situation where the fight and flight is activated, the adrenaline is running, a person might be in excruciating pain, but often they won't feel that pain for 20 or 30 seconds in. And as we already covered, 30 seconds is about how long the fight could last. In other words, a person could maim or kill you in that 30 seconds. So eyes, nose, chin, and throat and knees are better targets because we believe that by focusing on those targets, they do real structural damage. So that when the person is struck in the eye, they may or may not feel the pain. But one thing for certain, they will not be able to see anymore. When someone is struck in the chin, it might not hurt, but they will not be able to stay conscious. The same thing, throat, knees, a person won't be able to stand. We're going to focus on doing real structural damage, not just creating pain, because oftentimes pain isn't enough. We're going to talk about the parts of the hands that we strike with. So when we talk about the hands, we're talking about when we strike with our palms, we strike with our fingers, we strike with our elbows, we strike with our knees, we strike with our head. Fists are okay, but the thing to understand is that the fist is really for a trained fighter. Oftentimes, when a punch is thrown towards an attacker, if the attacker dips their chin or dips their head, when we strike the head, it's very easy to break your hands. So we're oftentimes better off to focus on open hand strikes rather than closed one. Knees, elbows, and even your head have a lot less degree of difficulty with them. So when we're in close, we're going to really rely on those. The second thing is always an external weapon is better than the weapons that are attached to your body. So holding keys in your hand, rocks, sticks, anything that's nearby. And this is not the time for fair play. This is the time for one word and one word only: survival. And then one of the things we like to do in our clinics is we like to strike pads. And we're going to strike the pads with our palms, with our elbows, and we're also going to use our shins and knees and some of the kicks that we love to work. And all of that works together to help us be more efficient and be better able to take care of ourselves. So those are the things that we cover in our clinic. And then I just want to share just a couple of really quick final thoughts. Once again, remember 90% of surviving a self-defense situation is prevention, 10% is actual practical application. Go back to the very beginning of the video. We talked about my story and the idea that if you are prepared and feel confident, the attackers often disappear. And the example we use for this is the famous product known as the club. They've interviewed car thief after car thief, and they'll say that they can absolutely defeat the club when you put a club in a car. But they almost never touch the cars that use the club because it takes them a little more time. And so it's so much easier to break into other cars that aren't using that device. And you just want to be the kind of person that can take care of yourself, and you take care of yourself, and because of that, you carry yourself in a way that would-be attackers go after someone else. And then the last thing I want to just mention to you is a little bit about the thought of considering real martial arts training for yourself. There's a couple of statistics that come across in self-defense that are really, really important. The chances of you being a victim, based on national statistics in the United States, are roughly 1 out of 250 Americans will be the victim of an assault. Now, that's excluding domestic things, and I understand that is a big, 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 giant thing. But just as we're living our everyday life, if we're not in a situation where you have that as a factor, your chances are still roughly about 1 in 250 of being able to taking your family to the ballpark or going out to dinner and then having to be physically threatened. So it's great, and 1 in 250 is too many, but the chances of you being physically attacked are still pretty slim. The second thing to remember, though, is that the chances of preventable illness, and that is things like obesity and heart disease and diabetes and things that will kill you, and they will kill you every bit as much as an attacker in a dark alley, will affect 1 in 3 Americans. So the chances of you actually having to defend yourself against an unhealthy lifestyle are hundreds of times more severe than actually having to defend yourself going to your car at night. So in the world of martial arts, of course we're going to address this idea of you learning how to take care of yourself and defend yourself physically. But we also want to address fitness. We want to get you in great shape and do it in a fun way and a thing that you enjoy, so that you don't become the 1 in 3 that's a victim of their own neglect. And then finally, this is probably the most important thing of all. The chances of you being mentally or verbally attacked, and as a consequence of that, being held back from your goals in this life, 100%. There is no one listening to my voice, no one listening to this video, that will not at some point, maybe most of you this week, be attacked physically, mentally, and told that you are less than what you really are. And so the way we look at it as a martial arts dojo, if we teach people primarily self-defense, we're serving only one person in 250. If we teach fitness, that's huge. That's gigantic. We're surveying 1 in 3 Americans. We can make a big difference in their life. But if we teach people to use martial arts, like we talked about before, as a tantra to bring about higher states of awareness and better focus and concentration and mental discipline, we're really making the planet a better place by bringing happiness and joy to people and helping them be better. Then we've done our job. And I think that's one of the things that we would like to leave in your heart and in your mind today. And then finally, just to retouch on this, in our martial arts school, people often start for self-defense. Once they get the benefit of self-defense, they realize, oh, it's not that important, and then they stay for the fitness because they're in the best shape they've ever been in their life. But those that have been with us for 10, 15, some 20 years, they become masters, and the reason that they become masters is the practice is designed to change their life for the better. So again, I want to thank you guys very much for checking out our video today, and I'm happy to be able to serve you. I'm going to go back to the other screen in just a second so that I can say goodbye. And I appreciate you coming out to the seminars and learning a little bit more about self-defense. And I hope this this video serves as a reminder of what Real Martial Arts is all about. If you have any questions, you can certainly get information on our website, which is listed right below my image here, which is ohiomartialarts.com, or you can call me directly at our dojo. Our phone number 419-385-1000. Thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you participating in this event, and we will see you on the mats.